My God, my head is all over the place this morning. I was just bringing plants over to show you for this video, and I sat down and I'm like, why am I holding spring onions? I've just been to the kitchen to get a plant. Obviously my head's gone off in another direction and I've just walked back with spring onions. They're red spring onions, which is quite exciting. I've never seen them before. But nonetheless, they are not the plants that I wanted to show you. Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well today. I am really excited to be making this video today because it's a video that I have wanted to make for such a long time, and for whatever reason I just haven't got around to actually filming. And I thought today I could take you through some plants that I don't think I can't see myself ever getting rid of, basically. And some of these are plants that maybe I don't talk about that much, but I feel like all of the ones I'm going to show you in today's video kind of form like the base of my collection. They're staples in my collection, meaning that if I was to have to start all of my houseplant collection again from scratch, I would probably get these ones first. So yeah, that is what we're going to be doing today. But first, if you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yuli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learned over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And yeah, I haven't stuck to, I know I often do like a top 10 or something, but I haven't stuck to 10 for this. I think I've got about 13 or 14 in total. Some of them, as you'll see, have like main plants and then sub-plants. But yeah, I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. So, as I always say, these are in no particular order. These are all just ones that I absolutely adore. And I've brought 3 of the same genus of plants over here, and there's similarities between them, but I couldn't pick just one to show you. So I'm going to show you 3 Aglaonema. And I know I have spoken about my love for Aglaonema in the past. I honestly just think it is the most beautiful genus of plant. This one is my Aglaonema stripes, and oh my God, just look at that foliage. Isn't that just stunning? The thing I love about Aglaonema is, firstly, it is so hardy. Like, this is a plant that you can put in pretty much any conditions. Like, this one is living in a very dark corner. In fact, all of my Aglaonemas are living in very dark corners, and they never give you any grief. They just remain looking really vibrant and healthy. They're not the fastest growing plants in the world, but once they get going, they're kind of unstoppable. Like, I have chopped some of my Aglaonemas back. In fact, another one that I have here to show you, my Aglaonema Silver Queen. This one here was a division from my, I say mother plant, my other big Silver Queen. And I know a lot of the time people say like, oh, why would you have duplicates of plants in your collection? But I think for me, like, I just love having little splashes of greenery throughout my house, even if it's an area that isn't maybe the best spot for tropical plants. I'll pop an Aglaonema there, and hence why I've got so many. This one actually is looking a little bit droopy. I think it needs some water, but I've got the big mother section of this plant through in the bedroom. I'll put a clip in of it so that you can see it. And yeah, it's just one that I never really have to worry about. And I've said it before as well, but in my experience, Aglaonema are so not susceptible to pests. I always think I'm jinxing it when I say it, but I have never, I don't think ever encountered an infestation on Aglaonema. My Aglaonema stripes actually, weirdly, a while ago had mealybugs, but it wasn't an infestation. It was literally just like 1 or 2, and I was like, that's a random one for it to get. But it was very treatable. I literally just squished them and gave it a shower down, and now the plant's absolutely fine. And then the other one, which actually, looking at it in this light, needs a little bit of a dust, is my Aglaonema Cutlass. And this is another one that I just adore. I love the colour of its leaves. They're almost kind of like a luminous green, or like, I don't know, there's something about them that's not quite as, it's almost like a cartoonish green, if that makes any sense at all. But I've said it before, but I feel like Aglaonemas are kind of, if you're wanting something like a Calathea and you're maybe a little bit nervous about bringing one into your collection, or you're not a very experienced plant parent and you want something really beautiful and really tropical and really colourful as well, because you can get some beautiful varieties of colours in Aglaonema. But then I think these ones are a really great shout because they have a lot of the same qualities as Calathea, but they are just so, as I say, they're so hardy. So yeah, I was going to say as well, actually, one of the first plants I got for Ross, again, I'll put a clip in of it, was a bright pink Aglaonema, which I'm pretty sure is an Aglaonema fireworks. And it's done amazingly for him, and I've never really given him much instruction with it. It just is growing really happily. And I grow these ones in a variety of substrates, and I don't necessarily think one's better than the other. I haven't really noticed any changes in growth, but this one and my Silver Queen I've got in semi-hydro. I've just got them in a chunky semi-hydro mix. And then my Cutlass I've got in a soil mix. And as I say, I haven't noticed any dramatic differences in the way that they grow that way, but I just find that, I've said it before, semi-hydro tends to be a lower maintenance way of caring for your plants. Like, I just water this one through, and I was gonna say make sure its reservoir stays filled. It's actually not filled at the moment. I do need to fill it. But again, this is one with a bone dry reservoir, and look how healthy it looks. It's just, I don't know, they're just such tolerant plants. So yeah, if I was stripping things back and I had to just immediately replace plants in my collection, I honestly think Aglaonema would be one of the first genuses that I would turn to replace, just because I love them and they give me no grief and they just look beautiful. So yeah, that's my rant about Aglaonema. And then another one that I don't talk about that much, and I feel like I probably don't talk about this one much just because it's thought of as a very kind of like bog standard basic houseplant. It's very popular, and I think it is very popular for a reason, and I don't think it gets enough credit, is just the pothos plant. I think it is gorgeous, and I've got so many different types of Peperomia in my collection, but I must have 4 or 5 golden pothos plants around my home, just because, again, they're really easy to care for. They grow really, really quickly. Like, this one was planted up of cuttings that I took, I think, at the beginning of the year. I think I'm right in saying that. And I potted it up and they were like there, and I've already chopped it back several times because this plant will not stop growing. It's also one that's just really good at telling you when it needs a drink. Like, if you look at it now, although it looks pretty full and pretty healthy, it is a little bit on the curly side. And maybe I just know that because this is my plant, but it's one that I feel like it's quite a good, you can see why it's such a good beginner plant, because it's one that teaches you quite a lot about plants just from kind of like observation. Like, I've got to know just from looking at a lot of my plants when they're ready for a drink, and this one is one that I feel like I kind of started learning that from when I was first starting out, because I think I'm right in saying one of my first plants was a pothos plant. In fact, I posted a video the other day reacting to a video that I'd made about 4 years ago where I was kind of going through and like styling my living room with plants, and one of the plants in that video was the mother plant of not only this pothos but many other pothos plants that have come after it, because, as I say, I've been propagating like crazy with this one. But there's so many different types of Peperomia that I absolutely love. I've got several others here that I'm looking at that I could show you, but the other one that I wanted to mention, oh, I've just knocked over one of Ross's creations, oops, it's fine, but was the Mandula pothos. And I've spoken a lot about this plant on my channel in the last year because I got this one, in fact this is 2 sections of plant that I got at another plant swap 2 times over from the same person, and it has become such a favourite in my collection. And honestly, it's the kind of plant that just makes me want to fill my house with it because I love it so much. The variegation on the leaves is just stunning. I originally thought it was quite a slow growing plant, but I think that is just the position that I've been keeping it in, because this is, despite what it looks like on camera, this is actually, I would say, kind of like a low to medium light spot. But now we're in the summer months and I'm getting sun through this window more. It is really kicking into action. Like, I could absolutely train that section of growth to like start climbing up the walls, or in fact get it onto a moss pole, because I don't know if you guys have seen what this plant looks like when it's big and mature on a moss pole. It looks absolutely gorgeous. I don't think I quite have the space to be growing it in that form at the moment, but my goodness, when I've got a little bit more space, I will definitely be getting a section of this onto a moss pole, because I just think it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I know I've said it so many times over, but I'm not the best with like super colourful houseplants. I don't know why, like I can just find it a little bit jarring, but I do love different shades of green. And this one kind of gives me, it's not like colourful per se, but it just gives me my little, kind of like a colour fix without the colour. And I know that sounds stupid, but it's just one that I look at and I'm like, oh, I don't know, like it just draws me in and I love it. Also, as I was setting up to film this video, and as I am filming, I am sipping a ginger beer that Ross actually made. He has got really into fermenting recently, and he's made, like, he made kimchi, he made sauerkraut, fermented ginger beer, and we've been drinking this over the last few days, and it's really, really nice, and it was extra fizzy today, and I'm just sat here about to move on to the next plant, and I kind of feel like I've had a couple of glasses of wine, and I'm hoping I'm not going to be drunk by the end of this video because I have a feeling it might have turned slightly alcoholic. I'll sip it slowly, just in case. So this next one is one that I've banged on about so many times before on my channel, and it is such a favourite in my collection. I absolutely love it. It is the Peperomia Hope. And this is one that I've kind of been doing a little bit of experimenting with because I had a Peperomia Hope when I was living in my old place back at my mum's, and it was growing beautifully for me. And honestly, I was talking about that plant all the time because I just adored it. And I moved here, and I think probably because there was such a dramatic change in like environment, because my mum had a conservatory. This place does not have a glass ceiling and it's semi-succulent. It likes lots and lots of light. It looked fine, but then almost overnight the plant just gave up and died. And I was so sad about it. I desperately tried to propagate the plant and I had no luck with it. So I got myself a very little plant on my birthday last year, which was I think about 7 months ago now, September last year. And it was literally in like a 5 centimetre pot. It was so tiny. And it was growing well for me, but all of its growth was just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And so I decided to lop it back and try and change up a few things to figure out what the plant wanted. And I feel like I have achieved that, but it's not yet at the level I would like it to be at. But I do feel like it's giving me lovely growth. I also in the process have worked out how to successfully propagate this plant, which for me is very exciting because it's not necessarily how you would think. The best way that I've found is taking cuttings of the actual leaves, chopping them in half, putting them in sphagnum moss in a prop box. It takes a while, but once they get going, you've got some lovely plants. And I have actually got a couple of little plants in a very little prop box that I made. And if I open it up, you can kind of see. You see the little leaves just starting to form there? So yeah, those are some of my successful propagations, but that has taken like 3 months to actually get them to start giving me new growth. But yeah, the Peperomia Hope is just one that I adore it because of its texture and the way that it grows. But again, it is very low maintenance because it is a semi-succulent. I watered this plant at the moment, maybe like once a week, and it's in direct sun. So yeah, it's one that doesn't require a huge amount of care. The only downside with this plant is that obviously it doesn't cope particularly well in lower lighting conditions, and it can be overwatered very easily. So if you are an overwaterer, this is just definitely something to bear in mind. Again, what I was saying just now about knowing a plant just by looking at it, this one, although it doesn't kind of go curly in the same way as a pothos plant does, I can tell that this plant is currently ready for a water. And the way that I can tell is just by looking at the colour of it. And you probably wouldn't be able to tell if you didn't own the plant, but it's very pale at the moment. And typically when this plant is really well hydrated, it's just a little bit darker and richer in its colour. So yeah, I can also feel the pot's quite light. So I'm going to put this one to one side and I will give it a good watering after I finish filming this video. But yeah, it's just lovely. I find it such a rewarding plant to grow, and honestly, I would not have a collection without it. I think I'd miss it so much. And then the next ones that I wanted to show you, you might be able to see behind me, but I'm going to bring the camera up so that you can see because they are very big now. I'm trying to figure out the best way to actually show you these ones, but these are two of my euphorbias that I cannot imagine not having in my collection anymore. I have actually acquired several euphorbias alongside these ones. I think I've got maybe about 7 or 8 different types in my collection, but this is my Euphorbia acrorensis, and this is my variegated Euphorbia amark, and I honestly adore them. And these are ones that have grown from really quite little things. Like this one, if you look back at my early videos, it wasn't branching at all. It was just like one long stick of Euphorbia, and it only came up to about my knee. And I don't know how well you can actually tell, but it's now taller than me. Like, it is a bigger plant than me. And this one here is getting on for that as well. It's kind of about up to my cheek now. So they're really quite fast growing plants once they get going, and that's because although obviously they look like cacti, they're actually not. They're succulents, and for that reason they can just grow. They can grow like aroids. They can grow ridiculously fast when they're kept in the right conditions. And these ones, actually, the reason you don't see them much in my videos anymore is just because they're so big. They've kind of outgrown this room. Like, I keep so many of my tropical plants in this room, and I would love to be able to keep these ones as well, but I've just run out of space. So because these ones don't require a huge amount of care, they're very drought tolerant, they live next door in the bedroom now, and that's not ideal conditions for them. They would ideally be getting much brighter light. But again, all of these things I think need to wait until we've got a slightly bigger space, because even though it feels wrong to have a plant and not be attempting to grow it as big and beautiful as possible. But if these ones get much bigger, I'm gonna have to chop them or think about rehoming them, and that is something that I just don't want to do. So yeah, as a temporary measure, they're living next door in the bedroom, but I still adore them. I just adore them. And yeah, again, if I was stripping my collection back to nothing and restarting, these are two of the ones that I would miss the most. So yeah, hence why they are on this list. There's also several other types of Euphorbia that I adore and I would want to replace fairly early on, but these two they're my babies. And another very big one that I actually can't pick up and show you very easily, but I will spin the camera around so that you can see it just there, is my Bird of Paradise. I'll also obviously put some clips in of this one. I got it down last week to give it a clean, so I'll put some clips in of that. But oh my God, the Bird of Paradise is probably my most jungly plant. Like, I've said it so many times before, but I feel like when I walk into this room, that's the plant that makes me go, oh my God, it feels like a jungle in here. And I just feel like it looks like a little slice of rainforest in the room. I think it's beautiful. I think it's such a beautiful plant. And on top of that, yet again, you'll find a common pattern here with the plants I'm talking about. It's another one that is very low maintenance. Like, it's another one that hasn't really given me any grief in my time of owning it. I water it currently every couple of weeks when it's pretty much completely dry. It's a very robust, kind of resilient plant as well. Its leaves are very thick. I don't find it's that susceptible to pests. Again, weirdly enough, the one, in fact, has had a couple of pest issues in my time of having it, but both of them have been really easy to treat. And the first one, again, is mealybugs, weirdly enough, which kind of makes more sense on the Bird of Paradise than it does with the Aglaonema, because it is a little bit waxier. But the other one's been spider mites, and again, I think this was last summer actually. It's when my first summer here, so yeah, it would have been last summer. I turned over one of its leaves and I could just see lots of webbing and I could see lots of spider mites, and I was like, oh my God, no, don't bring down my most beautiful plant. But I gave it a wipe down. I think I got it in the shower, and it's not one that I couldn't isolate it particularly easily because it is such a big plant. So I'm pretty sure it just went straight back in with the rest of my plants. The spider mites have never returned, and that was over a year ago now. So yeah, it's been one that's been very easy to treat. And yeah, it's one that's sized up relatively quickly in, I think I've had it for about 2 years now. About 2 years, and I got it not as a teeny tiny small plant, but it was probably only about up to there when I first got it. And I think the amount of growth it's given me in that time has been pretty substantial. I have also chopped it back a couple of times, not completely chopped back, but I have chopped back smaller leaves to make way for bigger ones. And yeah, it's now huge. It is 100% my biggest plant, and I just adore it. I think it's great, so cannot imagine not having that one. And another one that I adore, and I actually thought about including the variegated variety of this plant, but I decided against it, and I will tell you why. It's the Alocasia michelitziana, commonly known as the Alocasia Frydek, and I bang on about my variegated Frydek way more than I talk about this plant, and I love this plant. And although I would never think that I would get rid of my variegated Frydek, the thought of not having either and building my collection back up from scratch, I know that I would go out and get this one first. Also, if its leaves look a little bit dusty in places, it's just because I've put diatomaceous earth on it, because it did have spider mites a little while ago. But yeah, I think again, like it's definitely not a complicated alocasia, but it is one that when I first got it, I remember took me a little while to get my head around. It was doing lots of alocasia cycling, like it was giving me a leaf and then it was losing a leaf. And I was just like, oh, I can't keep this plant happy. And honestly, I don't know what changed apart from maybe it just took a while to acclimate, because almost overnight the plant was just fine. And I was like, oh my God, it's so low maintenance. It's one that nowadays I do very little to. I've got it in semi-hydro. All I do is keep its reservoir filled, and as I say, check for pests, because it is one, alocasia's on the whole to be honest, but it is one that can be a little bit susceptible. But touch wood, ooh, it's got spider web on me, and that's not spider mite, that is like a big old house spider. That's not nice. It's one that typically doesn't give me much grief nowadays, and I just think like it's almost like a cartoon plant. Like it's got that striking white veination that's almost quite two-dimensional. Like you look at plants, for example, like the Anthurium clarinervium, which is a gorgeous plant. I love that plant so much, but that one has a little bit of depth to its leaves while still being dark and dramatic with white veination, whereas this one, I remember the first time I saw it in a picture, I honestly thought it was photoshopped. I didn't think it was real. And that kind of hasn't worn off. Like every time I look at this plant, I kind of think the same thing. It doesn't quite look real, but I do really love the way that it looks. So yeah, it's one that I cannot imagine not having in my collection. And as I say, I know the variegated Alocasia Frydek is the one that I talk about the most, but I think I'd get this one again first if I had to choose between the two. Also, since I've chopped it back, look at the new growth it's giving me. It's giving me a leaf there, it's giving me a leaf there. And also, I said it in my other video, but this was very kindly sent to me by Cotton Lily, who I will pop just there, along with a beautiful macrame hanger, and it just helps all of the foliage to stand upright and look really pretty without looking like I've tied it or something. I just think it makes it look really neat and allows me to appreciate the plant really well. And controversially, I've included a plant that I've only had January, February, March, April, May, June, July, for about 6 months. So I haven't had this plant that long compared to the others that I'm showing you. But this one is my Anthurium paladifoliorum, and I thought I'd include it because honestly, this is a plant that I wanted for such a long time. It was on my wish list for years and years and years. I finally got it at the beginning of this year, and since I've got it, like, you know when you really want a plant, but I don't know, you almost don't know if it's going to live up to your expectations when you actually have it. This one I just feel grateful to own like all the time. I still can't quite believe that I've got it. And now that I have got it, I cannot imagine ever parting with this plant. So yeah, I feel like I will always have a paladifoliorum in my collection. And this one has just grown amazingly for me in the time that I've had it, because it wasn't teeny tiny when I got it, but its leaves were smaller than that one there. They probably came to about there. And there were only 2 of them, if I remember correctly. And just look at how it's sizing up so quickly, and it is starting to give me a new leaf there as well, which is so exciting. And I just find the paladifoliorum, out of all of the anthuriums I own, to be not just really hardy, but really fast growing, as I've just said, because Anthurium as a genus is quite well known for being quite slow. And although slow growth can be very rewarding, seeing as I wanted this plant for so long, it just makes me so happy that I don't have to, I'm impatient. I don't have to wait too long for new leaves. And it's actually at the stage now where I could definitely chop and propagate it. I put this little dome on it, which is actually just a milk-shaped cup, and I put sphagnum moss around there. So I've got some amazing aerial roots in there. And I've got this section of stem here, which I could air layer as well. So In theory, I could, as I say, I could chop and prop. I don't know, I don't currently have any desire to do that. But if at some point I want to share the love with this plant or I want to make it fuller, it's something I could do. But yeah, it's just really nice because, as I say, I have had occasions before where I'll really want a plant and then I get the plant and it just doesn't, it's not as good as I pictured it being. Like, it will be a short time kind of like, oh my God, I've got it. And then it's just kind of a bit like, oh, the novelty's worn off. That doesn't happen often, to be fair, but it has happened to me in the past, whereas this one, the novelty is very much still there. I'm looking forward to doing a little bit more of a deep dive on this plant with you guys at some point as well, because I've tried a few different things that I typically don't do for anthuriums with this plant. I've spoken a little bit about my secret anthurium collection, which is basically just a collection of plants that I am not documenting on my YouTube channel in the same way as I am some of my others, because I'm just kind of doing some experimentation for myself. I will, however, when I get some good results, be sharing all of that. I'll do a video specifically on that at some point over the next few months, I expect. But, oh, I know which one I want to show you. Can I get it down to show you? In fact, no, I'm not even going to attempt that. But the next one on my list is my Rhaphidophora tetrasperma, which I will put some clips in of, but it's the one that is going all the way up there. Oh my God, it is such a fast growing plant once it gets going. And again, it's another one that I honestly can't imagine not having. I love that plant so much, but it's one that I just don't speak about it that much because it's quite predictable in its growth structure. I don't feel like there's a huge amount to say about it that people would be interested in knowing. Like, sometimes I'll have a plant that gets a new leaf and I'm like, oh my God, like for example, again, variegated Frydek, I'll be like, I have to share this, I need to show you what it looks like, and everyone will be like, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful. Whereas with this one, it grows like a weed and every leaf looks pretty much exactly the same, but I just really like it. I love standing back and looking at the texture of its leaves in amongst all the others. Those fenestrations are just beautiful. It's known as Monstera minima, and you can absolutely see why, because it has completely got Monstera vibes. And currently I'm growing it in semi-hydro in a jar. And if you look at the size of the jar, let's see if I can turn you around and show you. But if you look at the size of the jar, that is the jar that massive plant is growing in. And obviously it's got a fairly substantial root system. Oh my God, I don't want to knock it over. But that one is definitely due for a repot. But it's still growing at that rate, despite the fact that its root system is being contained in something so small. So again, very hardy, just an awesome plant, one I could not recommend enough. And then finally, again, I've grouped these two together because they're both Monsteras and ones that there's another Monstera that could so easily go into this, but I'll go and I'll include it as well. So the Monsteras that I could not part with or would be getting again are firstly my Monstera deliciosa, my big Monstera deliciosa that you might have seen just there. Again, I'll put some clips in. I just adore it. I think it's so lovely. It's so easy to care for. Not the fastest growing plant in the world, but if it's getting good levels of light, it's definitely not a slow grower. Like, I would say it's definitely quicker than like the Bird of Paradise, for example. And I guess they kind of fit into the same bracket, but I would also include my variegated Monstera, my big one, just there. I say put it into the same bracket because obviously it is technically a different type of Monstera. That's a variegated Monstera albo. However, the variegation on that one, the level of variegation is so incredibly low. Although it is a variegated Monstera, I tend to just say Monstera nowadays. And the one that I wasn't going to include, but looking at it now, I feel like I can't not, is my Monstera dubia. And my Monstera dubia, you might not be able to see from here, but actually isn't looking as healthy as she has been in the past at the moment. And I am kind of bracing myself to chop that plant. It's not going to be an easy chop to make, hence why I'm letting that top section of her growth kind of grow out, because I'm going to do exactly what I did when I chopped her about this time last year. I'm going to do a chop, prop, reroot and get a new plant growing and then just propagate all the other sections. But if I was to not start my collection again with the Monstera dubia, if I was to keep like Deliciosa and the one that I just said is a variegated Monstera, but not a variegated Monstera. I would actually really enjoy starting my dubia like from scratch, like starting it as a shingling form as I first got it, and then just watching it grow and develop from there, because I found that a really fun challenge to try and get it to size up, and the growth that I've managed to achieve in it, I just feel really proud of it because it's so beautiful. So yeah, there were also, oh God, quite a few others that I could have included in this video, but I thought that this was a concise way of keeping it. Like honestly, I've got like 10 more that I could have so easily put on this list, but yeah, those are the ones that if I had to start again, I think I would start off with. But I would be so interested to know what some of yours would be, so please do let me know down in the comments below. Do we have any of the same choices? But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video. I hope I didn't seem drunk for that.
Stay sexy, plant lovers.